Through all the employments of life, each neighbour abuses his brother. Whore and rogue they call husband and wife. All professions berogue one another. The priest calls a lawyer a cheat. The lawyer benaves the divine. And the statesman, because he's so great, thinks his trade as honest as mine. Not a dry eye in the house.
That was beautiful. Welcome to the fifth performance in our close reading series on satire. We are Clare Bucknell and Colin Burrow, CB1 and CB2, collectively the CBBS, and we are Fellows of All Souls and contributors to the paper. Now, Colin's unforgettable performance there
Thank you
was
so much for unforgettable. I'll treasure that.
Was the opening song in John Gay's The Beggar's Opera, 1728, sung by the arch-villain of the piece, a crime boss called Peachum.
So we're talking today about a kind of satire we've not touched on so far. We've had social satire, verse satire, sexual satire, learned satire and theatrical satire. But The Beggar's Opera is a musical satire, and in some ways, I suppose it's the origin of present-day musical theatre with that sort of deliberately kitsch element of self-parody in the mix. And you could also see it in some ways as one of the origins of English pantomime, where great old stories get sprayed with off-colour jokes and low-life interludes and rude songs. And that makes it quite a hard piece to tune into on first reading. I can remember when I first read it, I just thought, what is going on here? And our main aim, I suppose, is to give you its wavelength and its milieu. And Claire, you're going to do that for us, aren't you?
Yes, absolutely. Well, the milieu is crime, 18th century grunge. So Peachum, croaky old Colin, makes his living from trading in stolen goods and then handing over the thieves that he uses to steal those goods to the authorities for the reward money.
And it's nice work if you can get it, Claire, I'll tell you.
When will this end? If anyone knows just how bad human beings can be, it's him. So the song that you just heard sort of builds up a world in which no one is safe from the slagging off and backstabbing of others. It's a world in which assuming the worst of people is the smart thing to do, and the few who cooperate with others, play nice and think well of them are fools.
So you're seeing it as a satire of complete disenchantment with everything?
Well, yeah, perhaps, and we will see that as we go on, but the world works as it does because everyone who matters plays by the rules. So statesmen, priests, lawyers, churchmen, who are supposedly the pillars of public life, are all greedy and hypocritical in similar ways. And because money and social position are what everyone is basically after, it's not in anyone's interests to act otherwise.
Yeah, and I suppose underlying it is a sort of perverse philosophy of society, or kind of anti-philosophy. And Gay, I think, certainly read Bernard Mandeville's Fable of the Bees of 1714, and that presented that sort of upside-down view of the society as one in which people's private vices, their greed and their vanity and their avarice, all those terrible vices, could contribute to public good, keep the economy moving, essentially, I suppose. And that rather cosy vision of the beneficial effects of vice is perhaps Gay's main satirical target, and it lets him create a kind of mad world in which being a really good criminal is more or less equated with being good, which is, not entirely orthodox ethics, is it, actually?
It's not, no. And it's also the story of what happens when romantic love, a different kind of human inclination, a different set of interests, moves into the world of avarice and basically mucks things up.
And satire really can't cope with love. It's one of the sort of forbidden areas, isn't it? And the younger generation in The Beggar's Opera are almost trying to live in a different world from that of the old devils like Peachum.
Exactly. Well, we will start with a sort of plot summary for you. The action takes place in London in Gay's own day, in 1727, in fact, not long after the coronation of King George II. And in the opening scenes, Peachum and his wife learn that their daughter, Polly, has fallen for and secretly married Macheath, a dashing highwayman on Peachum's books.
And I strongly recommend the 1953 Olivier film of The Beggar's Opera, directed by Peter Brook. It was his first feature film, actually. And you get Laurence Olivier there as Macheath, and he wears thigh-length shiny leather boots throughout and swings from ropes and does the full Errol Flynn swashbuckling thing, and it's wildly sexy.
Okay, let's get back to the plot and away from Colin's unhealthy obsessions. When Polly falls for swashbuckling Macheath, it is bad news.
It's a sort of economic disaster, really, isn't it?
Yeah, because Polly unmarried has been an integral part of the family business. You know, you can always put an unattached, handsome wench, quote unquote, to use in the criminal world. But married, she's not only less useful, she's also a danger. Because Macheath knows too much about the Peachums' dodgy business practices to be safely brought into the family fold.
But it is a sort of Mandevillian family, isn't it, where they only get on and succeed by being crooks together.
Exactly, and this messes it up. So the risk is betrayal. Peachum believes that Macheath must be betrayed to the authorities before he can do any betraying or secret spilling in his turn. And given that this is Britain in the 1720s, to hand him over or impeach him, Peachum, means not landing him in jail, but putting a noose around his neck. So Peachum instructs his daughter Polly, do you want to do this? Do the voice?
Secure what he has got. Have him impeached in the next sessions. That is when the courts next convene. And then at once you're made a rich widow. Since the thing sooner or later must happen, I dare say the captain himself would like that we should get the reward for his death sooner than a stranger. And that's a brilliant example of how the opera perverts good sentiments, because Peachum's pretending that Macheath would be pleased on altruistic grounds to be betrayed and hanged by his wife rather than a stranger. And that does leave altruism a little bit sullied, doesn't it?
It kind of does. But, you know, the love story seems at first to be able to push back against all those dark and perverse motives. At the end of the first act, Polly arranges for Macheath to escape from the Peachum household, and the lovers part with many sighs and professions of eternal love.
Oh, bless.
So while his highwaymen gang takes to the road to relieve aristocrats of their gold, Macheath lies low, stays quiet, hides from Peachum. But unfortunately, as things turn out, his version of lying low is going to a tavern and drinking gin with a group of women of ill repute who aren't exactly discreet.
And I suppose that isn't the behaviour that Polly would be quite expecting of him, would it?
No, Polly thinks he's faithful only to her. And his love of a good time entraps him. Peachum has been one step ahead and has arranged for the women to get him drunk and betray him to the constables. And Macheath ends up in Newgate, the notorious prison in the city of London, shackled and awaiting trial. And there he comes across some old pals. Locket, the corrupt official. Good name. We know what he's doing. He's the corrupt official in charge of the prison and also Peachum's secret partner in crime. And Lucy, Locket's daughter, who's 5 months pregnant with Macheath's child and thinks that she, not Polly, ought to be recognised as his wife.
Which is sort of fair enough, really, isn't it? So we got two generations in parallel. We got Locket, the avaricious old jailer, and we got Peachum the fence. And their daughters are both in love with Macheath. And their view of life, the younger people's view of life, according to old cynics like me, is rooted in romantic cliché, which doesn't fit this world.
Exactly. And Macheath is a kind of pivot between those two groups. So he's got the genuine glamour and the youth.
And the thigh-length leather boots as well. Let's not forget those.
I would really like to forget those.
Okay.
But in his way, he's as cynical as Locket and Peachum are. So he uses that dashing highwayman sex appeal at his disposal to convince Lucy to steal her father's keys and spring him from prison. So he uses her in that cynical way. And meanwhile, Polly and Lucy are warring over his affections. There's a great melodramatic scene where Lucy tries to kill Polly by poisoning her, but all in vain.
And in the Jonathan Miller BBC film version, the melodrama of that poisoning scene gets milked for absolutely all it's worth, because the poison is a bubbling brew of dry ice, like something you'd see in a Hammer horror movie. And the extraordinary thing about that production is that Roger Daltrey of The Who is playing Macheath. And, you know, he lacks the allure of Olivier and those boots and so on, but he's actually quite good.
Okay, well, Macheath / Roger Daltrey is soon back in jail in the play, betrayed once again by a woman. It's a kind of running joke that all Macheath does is sort of hide out supinely with women who then screw him over.
It's life.
That's life. A member of his supposedly loyal gang then gives evidence against him, which is the sort of crowning injustice, and that condemns him to the gallows.
And there's that great casual moment at at the end, which finally does for our view of Macheath as a glamorous figure. 4 more women appear at the prison, all with children, all claiming to be his wife. And then he just goes, OK, it's time to die.
Yes, he sort of resorts to Dutch courage in his condemned cell. And you can tell he's sort of increasingly keen to be hanged to escape his obligations.
But then we get that great piece of metafiction at the end, don't we?
Yeah, so at the 11th hour...
And the 59th minute, probably, too.
Yes, that's probably true.
Really
yes,
at the death's door,
yes.
yeah.
A character called the Player, who sort of stands outside the action, intervenes, and he says that since operas always end happily, there can be no nasty hangings or prison sentences or transportations for any of the characters. So justice of the legal and poetic kind is averted. And Macheath and, all the other criminals, Peacham, Lockett, the highway gang, the pickpockets, all of them, they all go free.
And we'll have to come back to that ending because it's a kind of satire at the level of plot, really, isn't it? Which confesses that in reality all of these people would be hanged, but at the same time admits that in operas an audience just can't bear that much reality. So it's sort of satirising the people in the play and the whole medium of the play simultaneously.
Exactly. Well, the Beggar's Opera wasn't Gay's first play. By 1728, he'd written several, including a comedy, a tragedy, a serious opera libretto, and something he called a tragi-comi pastoral farce. But it was by a long shot, his most successful. So it ran for a record-smashing 62 nights in its first season. And the history books tell us that on one night, so many people showed up wanting to see it that John Rich, who was Gay's producer, crammed 98 spectators onto the stage, which is kind of an extraordinary thing to imagine.
Yeah, and people said at the time that the opera made Rich gay, that is to say happy, and Gay rich. And Rich, who did make a lot of money out of it and became happy, one assumes, as a result, was actually quite an interesting figure because he was one of the main inventors of the English pantomime tradition. And he was famous for his role as Arlecchino, the sort of great mime artist in those triangular suits, from Italian theatre. And the place where the Beggar's Opera was put on, in Lincoln's Inn Fields, was the same theatre that put on the pantomimes. And I think that tells you something about the tone of the Beggar's Opera and perhaps also about the kind of pleasures that it's offering its audience. It really was genuinely popular entertainment.
Yeah, so we have a sense of that from a letter that Gay wrote to his friend Jonathan Swift in March of 1728. And he describes an evening when another play was meant to be performed, but the people called out for the Beggar's Opera.
The Beggar's Opera, the Beggar's Opera.
And they were forced to play it, or the audience would not have stayed. I mean, great satisfaction you would have derived from that, wouldn't you?
It'd be fantastic, yeah.
Thanks for listening to this extract from On Satire, a close reading series from the London Review of Books. To listen to the full episode and all our other close reading series, sign up to our close reading subscription at lrb.me/close readings or click on the link in the description.